Hello and welcome to the Civil Times. Today we'll deal with the editorials of 1st February. These are the articles we'll be covering from the Hindu and the Indian Express. Starting with the editorial from the Hindu, heading towards strategic instability. In this article or in this editorial, the author basically questions India's preparedness for the new age war, which has been broadened by the disruptive technologies which play a key role in shaping the entire rules of game or the warfare. The context of this article would be the government's decision in late December 2018 to set up three separate agencies, namely the Defense Cyber Agency, the Defense Space Agency, and your Special Operations Division. Now, as these two names suggest, the Defense Cyber and the Defense Space Agencies will deal with their respective domains of warfare in space and cyber, while the Special Operations Division will comprise of commandos from the existing services of Army, Navy and the Air Force, who shall train together to prepare for meeting any exigency scenario. Now, what the author points out or laments is that the Naresh Chandra Committee as well as the Chief of Staff's Committee in 2012 had suggested or recommended to the Indian government for setting up three separate commands for space, cyber and the special operations, which shall work in synergy to meet emerging threats. The author says the government's decision is basically a far cry from what the committees had basically suggested. Moreover, the author questions, is India adequately prepared for the new age wars? Now, what is a disruptive technology? A disruptive technology, what is a disruptive technology? A disruptive technology is any enhanced or a completely new technology which disrupts the existing technology and renders it obsolete, that is, useless in the face of a disruptive technology. Now, the author says that there is a revolution in military affairs due to the onset or the advent of disruptive technologies. Moreover, it has been seen or history is evidence for the fact that any disruptive technology such as tanks, submarines, radars are basically the cause for victory in a war, play a huge role in shaping the outcome of the war. The revolution in military affairs with respect to the high-tech innovations such as artificial intelligence, big data analytics, satellite jammers or quantum computing, etc. have deeply frustrated the strategic stability of the major powers. Now, what is strategic stability? Strategic stability is basically based upon the age-old certainties upon which the defense mechanisms of most powers are set, such as the belief that the possession of nuclear arsenal is basically a good deterrence. That is, the strategic stability of a nuclear arsenal rests upon the survivability of a state's nuclear arsenal. Moreover, the ability of a state to carry out a second strike in case of a first attack. For instance, the naval leg of the nuclear triad is basically expected to be the safest best, for the submarine or the ship wanders in the expanse of the ocean far from the traces of the enemy. However, the author says with the disruptive technology of deep sea drones, which can basically catch hold of or basically detect these ballistic missile armed nuclear submarines or the SSBNs, will make the naval leg of the nuclear triad obsolete. Further, the author points out that there is an inherent paradox in the high-tech enabled military system. This inherent paradox is basically that first of all, the nations are forced to redesign themselves in the face of disruptive technology. However, these disruptive technologies also make the existing systems quite vulnerable to cyber or space attack. This leads to increased mistrust and instability, which has high potential for uncontrolled escalation of warfare. Moreover, it leads to cascading strategic competition. The author further moves on to India's neighbor, China. China, he says, is a key actor in the field of emerging military technologies. Despite the fact that most of Chinese focus is evidently upon US capabilities, however, it is not without latent concerns for New Delhi. India might in turn consider developing some of these technologies, which will create dilemmas for Islamabad. The author further says that the decision by the Indian government to set up these three agencies is a timely effort from the government. However, it came in a bit late, and he questions the sense of urgency, whether the government in Delhi realizes the sense of urgency in preparedness for the New Age war. Moreover, he laments, the author is sad, he says that it is very sad that these have been set up as agencies which will be reduced in their powers and standing in the pecking order of defense planning. Moreover, reports indicate that the Space Command will be headed by the Air Force, the Army shall be responsible for handling the Special Operations Command, while the Navy will be in charge of the Cyber Command. Indeed, this will reduce the synergy which was the recommendation of the discussed committees. And moreover, he also points out that since the higher defense decision making in the country is civil services dominated, this will basically reduce the effectiveness of these agencies. Moving on to the next article. This article is not kosher. This article basically talks about the Chanda Kosher case, which is basically the ICICI and the Videocon loan case, wherein Chanda Kosher was found to be violating the conflict of interest and the corporate governance norms. We'll go along with this article. This article becomes important from the perspective of corporate governance, which is a topic in GS4. That is your ethics paper. The author says that the inquiry by the former Supreme Court Justice B.N. Sri Krishna into the allegations against the ICICI Bank CEO Chanda Kosher has taken 8 months to confirm what seemed apparent, that she did not conduct herself as she should have in relation to the conflict of interest issues. It was only last week that the CBI had filed an FIR against Ms. Kosher, her husband Deepak Kosher, the head of Videocon Group Venugopal Dhuth, and the ICICI Bank executives for sanction of credit facilities in violation of rules that caused the bank a loss of Rs 1730 crore to the bank. Now, what happened in this case is basically not very useful from the perspective of UPSC, or not at all useful. However, it shall be nice to know what the basic issue is. The issue is that Deepak Kosher, who is the husband of Miss Chanda Kosher, had set up a company. We'll take a new page for this. Just a moment. We'll take up this page. What happened in the ICICI and the Videocon loan case, which is also a Chanda Kosher loan case. Basically, Deepak Kosher and Venugopal Dhuth had together set up a company called New Power in 2008. Now, ICICI whose CEO was Ms. Chanda Kochar, had sanctioned loans to Venugopal Dutt, who had helped DK, who was Deepak Kochar, acquire certain shares in a new company. This basically is pointed out as a conflict of issue case or a sweetheart deal case, as has been pointed by the media. Moreover, Miss Kochar had erred, and badly at that, in not disclosing to the bank's board her husband's business connections with the Videocon group, which was a client of the bank. This is where Videocon had basically ICICI had basically loaned to the Videocon group. Moreover, she failed to display the correctness expected of her by sitting on committees that sanctioned trade facilities. Just a day after the 300 crore loan was disbursed to Videocon International Electronics in 2009, Mr. Kochar's New Power Renewables received 64 crores from the Videocon group. Whether this was a quid pro quo loan, as the CBI suggests, is yet to be proved. This basically raises doubt over the standards of corporate governance in India, and the ICICI Bank episode is only one among the several instances of governance lapses in corporate India. We'll move on to the next article. The next article is on a cliff edge. Britain veers to a hard Brexit as Prime Minister May continues to placate Tory hardliners. Now, this article basically deals with the internal politics over the issue of Brexit, which is going on in the British Parliament. Now, we will not discuss this article per se. What we'll discuss basically is the Brexit issue, which has been ongoing for a long time. We'll take up this page. Now, we'll take up what is Brexit. Brexit basically means the exit of Britain from the EU. Brexit is named after Grexit, or a similar instance where the Greek had decided to exit from the European Union. Now, we'll discuss in very brief the history of the European Union. Now, post-World War II scenario, which had led to massive economic, political, and human losses, the economies of Europe, or the nations of Europe, decided that if the economies of European nations were integrated, these will lead to less conflicts politically. Therefore, in 1957, 6 countries of Europe, not including United Kingdom, got together and signed the Treaty of Rome, which basically resulted in the formation of the European Economic Community. Now, note that United Kingdom was not a part of this EEC, despite the fact that UK had tried to enter into it in 1963 as well as 67. Now, this entry was not allowed by the French President, Mr. de Gaulle, who had basically distrusted the United Kingdom. Now, in 1973, the UK finally became a member. However, there was huge uncertainty in United Kingdom among the masses whether UK should be a part of the European Economic Community, and therefore, merely after 2 years of joining the EEC in 1973, there was a referendum held in the United Kingdom of whether United Kingdom should remain a part of the EEC, which came out positive, and therefore United Kingdom remained a part of EEC. This EEC went further and evolved into the European Union as we know of now, which comprises of 28 member states of Europe. Moreover, as the European nations basically became integrated and submitted or renounced their sovereignty to the European Union, however, UK tried to maintain its independence, such as in 1995, the UK decided not to approve of the Schengen Agreement, which was signed in 1985. The Schengen Agreement, or the Schengen Agreement, basically allows for free movement of labor, goods and services. Moreover, it also chose or UK chose to be the only country which decided to continue with its pound currency. The Schengen also disallows or asks for removal of all the internal border checks to allow free movement of capital and labor. Now in 2009, the nations of European Union had signed the Lisbon Treaty, which provided for, now there was a particular article, Article 50 in the Lisbon Treaty, which provided for any European nation or any member state of the European Union to leave the European Union. Now this period, now we are basically discussing what led to Britain deciding to exit the Brexit. Now as we've discussed, in 2009 the Lisbon Treaty was signed, which provided for the Article 50, which basically provides for any European nation the option to leave the European Union. Now this period, as you must all be knowing, was also marked by the 2008 global recession. Further, during this time, Greece, a significant member of the European Union, had suffered deeply economically, and the European Union had pressurized the Greece to observe severe austerity measures. Moreover, this Greece, or the slowdown in Greece in particular, had had heavy costs on the other European member states. Moreover, the biggest factor that drove the Britain to reconsider its membership of the European Union was the immigration crisis post the conflict scenario in West Asia, or the Middle East, as we all know it. This immigration crisis compounded with the spurt in terrorist attacks in London and in UK, United Kingdom, and other European nations, aroused nationalist feelings in Britain. And consequent to that, the Prime Minister David Cameron, in his campaign, announced that he will propose an exit from the European Union if he is elected to power. And consequent to this, a referendum was held in June 2016, in which, by a small majority, the pro-Brexit won over those who were no Brexiteers. And therefore, on 29th March 2017, United Kingdom invoked the Article 50, which basically began with the onset of the transition period, the transition period of 2 years, ending upon 29th March 2019, when the British will basically exit the European Union. Moreover, now we'll discuss the ongoing issue. We'll discuss in brief what is the Brexit deal. The basic Brexit deal is not a single deal. It basically has 3 parts to it. The first part is the withdrawal agreement, which will basically discuss the citizens' rights in EU, that is, the rights of the citizens of United Kingdom who are in EU, or the rights of the EU citizens who are residing in United Kingdom. Further, it will discuss the transition period, or the relation in the transition period, the terms of agreement in the transition period, which shall begin on 29 March 2019. Moreover, this withdrawal agreement will also decide how much money UK will have to pay to the European Union during this transition period. The second part of the Brexit deal is basically the political declaration, which will basically decide the future relation that Britain will have with the EU. Now this is not decided upon yet, however, and this is non-binding. Mind you, The withdrawal agreement was legally binding, whereas the political declaration is not legally binding. This will, however, serve as a direction for the next set of negotiations. The third portion of the Brexit deal is the backstop, which has become the major source of controversy or issue upon which no deal is able to be finalized in the British Parliament. Now, what is this backstop? Backstop is nothing but basically a backup plan. First, we'll discuss what the elements of backstop are. Backstop basically has two elements to it. First of all, that UK will stay in the customs union. Further, there shall be no hard border in Ireland. We'll see the map for this. Now, what is the backstop? We'll discuss in very brief what is the backstop. As we have stated before, backstop is nothing but a backup plan until a deal is finalized so that peace and stability can be maintained between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Mind you, there were a series of violent incidents between the Northern Ireland. Let us draw United Kingdom in brief. This is the shape of United Kingdom, while this is the island of Ireland. This forms your Great Britain. Now, the Northern Ireland is somewhere over here. This becomes your Northern Ireland, while this portion, the shaded portion, is your Republic of Ireland. Now, this Northern Ireland combined with your Great Britain forms your United Kingdom. The Y is backstop. A Y is this Irish border, the main bone of contention, because of which the deal is not being able to finalize. Because if the UK, that is the United Kingdom, which is Northern Ireland, plus your Great Britain, we'll color this. This is your United Kingdom. If this plans to draw out of the European Union, then how shall there be an exchange of goods between Britain or United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland, which is still a member of the European Union? Now, whether there will be a hard border or a soft border, that is basically the bone of contention here. Now, mind you, Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland had been in conflict for around a period of 30 years, which were known as Troubles. And this ended as late as 1992 with the signing of the Good Friday Agreement. We'll go back to editorial. Now see, what does May's Brexit deal mean for the UK? We'll discuss in very brief. One has the Irish border backstop, which we have discussed, which is basically a backup plan as to whether there'll be hard border. This is in Northern Ireland and this is your Republic of Ireland. Whether there'll be hard border, that is customs check and the stationing of UK security forces at this border, or a soft border, which will have merely the customs check. The second portion of the deal is UK staying in the customs union, the Gibraltar, the divorce bill, that is how much the UK will pay to the European Union, the European Court of Justice, whether the decisions of the European Court of Justice will continue to have binding force in Britain, fishing, freedom of movement of labour, capital, and exit clause. These you can read in detail. In the end, we'll also discuss the various stages of economic integration. Which are basically, we'll discuss in the end of this article, in this video lecture. Now, this article is from the Indian Express for the farmer things to do. In this article, basically what the author is saying is that 86% or more than 86% of the farmers in India are basically small, which means they have The size of land holding for the small farmers is between 1 to 2 hectares, whereas the marginal farmers have land holdings of size even less than 1 hectare. And despite this fact, these farmers have basically belied the general assumption that the farm size is inversely proportional to the productivity. This he says in the context of the rising production that has been seen recently, which has led to the market prices of the food grains and other products, market prices falling much below the MSP, which has led to rural distress. Now, the main argument of the article or the author is how do we raise the incomes of the farmers? He says there are 3 basic solutions to reducing farmer incomes. One is basically reduction in the cost of production. Second, you increase the productivity as well as production. And third, he says the prices should be remunerative. Now, he has given 6 solutions to raising farmers' income. First, he says the price of seed. The prices of seeds. He discusses this issue. Now, he says the farmers currently are procuring hybrid seeds from the market, which are disease and pest resistant. Moreover, they have high productivity. However, these hybrid seeds are pretty expensive for the farmers. What the author suggests instead research should develop open pollinated varieties of seeds which will have the same features of disease and pest resistance and high productivity, and which can be cultivated openly by farmers themselves. This shall bring down the cost of production by reducing the prices of the seeds that the farmers have to procure from the market. The second point, he says, that the public funded meaning that has been funded by taxpayers' money, the public funded research, whatever hybrid seeds are being developed by public funded research should be freely available to the public sector institutions, free of royalty. Instead, what the author says is this royalty should be accessed out of the private sector institutes. This will again bring down further the prices of seeds and therefore consequently the prices of production. Third, the author says that all the farmers are formal credit. Third, the author says the formal credit should be made accessible to all the farmers. Now, we all know that most of the farmers, especially the small and the marginal farmers in the rural areas, rely upon informal sources of credit, such as your moneylenders, who charge exorbitant interest rates from the small and marginal farmers, which leads to further indebtedness. Moreover, the author suggests that the amount of agricultural credit which is given to a farmer should be proportional to his land holding rather than the scale of finance required for crops. Now, how will this be beneficial? The author says this will ensure a flow of agricultural credit, first of all. Moreover, this will infuse capital into the backward regions. And plus, this will also ensure a better uptake of the insurance scheme. And with the current provisioning by the central government, the author says that agricultural to the extent of rupees 1 lakh per hectare can be provided as crop loan. The fourth point that the author points out towards raising farmers' income would be direct transfer of subsidy. However, this should whereas the author said that the agricultural, in the previous point, the author has said that the agricultural credit should be proportional to the land holding. Here, the author said that the direct subsidy transfer should be such that so as to incentivize desired cropping pattern. Now, how this will help, the author says, it will lead to a demand-led cultivation, which will bring about increased procurement from the farmers and no distress selling and curb distress selling. Further, he says that this will also make use of judicial use of natural resources, which will lead to environmental sustainability. The fifth point the author points out is allowing leasing of land. Now, when you allow leasing of land, what happens is this helps in identifying the real tillers of the land, and therefore the benefits which are to be extended by the government, either the central or the state, will reach the real tillers of the land and not the landowners. I hope this point is clear. The sixth point the author points out is the unviable sources or the unviable size of land holdings in India. Here he points out the agricultural census, which says that the average landholding size has decreased from 2.28 hectares in 1970-71 to 1.08 hectares in 2015 and 16. That is, each farmer basically has less than 1.5 hectares of land. Now, if we take out the large farmers, then it will become obvious that most of the farmers in UP and Bihar own less than 1.5 hectares of land. With this land holding size, it is simply not possible to have a decent standard of living until and unless there are other sources of income upon which the farmer can rely. Moving on, I hope this article is absolutely clear for you. Moving on to the next article, what's causing extreme cold in the US Midwest? Now, all of a sudden, the US Midwest, which is basically in USA, 22 states are experiencing extreme colds and sub-zero temperatures. Now, the cause of this is being pointed out to the polar vortex. Now, we'll understand what is basically a polar vortex and what has happened. Now, the polar vortex. We'll move to the next page. The polar vortex, first of all, is nothing new. To be understood, it is nothing new. It is always there, hovering above both the polar regions at about heights of 33 to 35 miles in the air, hovering and swirling in the anti-clockwise direction. That is, if these are your North Pole and the South Pole, these become your polar vortices. These swirl around in anti-clockwise direction at speeds as high as 150 miles per hour. And basically, these polar vortices swirl in tight circles. However, what happens is, sometimes these polar vortices weaken. And due to this weakening, it basically loses its tight circle and starts assuming irregular shapes and moving southwards. That is, the polar vortex basically swirls around in a tight circle. However, in case it weakens, it starts assuming an irregular shape and starts moving southwards. This basically drives. Now, this polar vortex is also surrounded by a polar jet streams, which are not as high as a polar vortex, but at a height of say 6 to 7 miles above your Earth's surface. Now, this, as the polar vortex assumes a irregular shape, it basically sends this polar jet stream down towards the US Midwest, and which has happened now, which has basically become the cause of the Arctic chill. Now, what the scientists are basically pointing out is the impact of is the relation between the global change or the global warming and this polar vortex or the Arctic chill. What happens is, according to the scientists, due to global warming, when the heat invades your Arctic regions, The polar vortex is completely made to shift its shape, becoming irregular and starting moving southwards, which pushes the, or what we have basically discussed before, pushes the polar jet stream southwards towards the US, which has basically become the cause of the Arctic chill, which is basically the sub-zero temperatures being experienced across the US Midwest. I hope this article is clear for you. Now, as we had stated before, we'll discuss the economic or the various stages of economic integration. Now, what is basically, first of all, economic integration? Economic integration is basically reduction or absolute removal of trade barriers plus a coordination of monetary and fiscal policies between the various member states, of the trading bloc. Now, there are 6 stages to your economic integration. The first is your preferential trade agreement. In this is basically a trading bloc where the member states agree to reduce or remove all tariffs upon certain items or goods. This is what you can understand in brief. That is reduction or a removal of all tariffs upon certain goods and services. The next stage is your free trade agreement, which is again a trading bloc where there is a reduction or removal of tariffs on all goods and services. Next stage in economic integration is your customs union. Here what happens is there is a reduction or a removal of tariffs among the member states, plus there is a common tariff for the non-members. The next stage is your common market, which is nothing but a free exchange, which is basically a customs union with a free exchange of goods, services, labor and capital. The 5th stage of economic integration is your economic union, which is basically a common market bloc which has one trade policy with all non-members. The final stage of economic integration is your monetary union, where all the member states adopt a single currency, such as your European Union, which has adopted the euro. The example of a FTA or a free trade agreement would be your NAFTA. Now, what Britain has proposed in its deal is basically that British will remain in the customs union rather than the complete monetary union, which it had never agreed to do so. So that shall all be for the lecture today. Thank you and have a good day.